My name is Adrian Vale, and at my sister's wedding, her future father-in-law didn't even glance at me, walking past as though I were part of the decor, a shadow among guests, and yet I stood there in a tailored suit, a glass loosely held in my hand, knowing something he didn't. Gregory Hale, a man whose reputation for business ruthlessness preceded him, had spent the last year trying to acquire a company he didn't realize I co-founded from scratch, a company his own operations had quietly depended on for months, but he didn't see that. He saw only what he expected to see. Someone ordinary, someone inconsequential. And I let him, because I had learned long ago that some people need to underestimate you for you to move freely. Because in just a few minutes, I would be called to speak, and I didn't need arrogance or bluster to make the point. I just needed to introduce myself. Loss doesn't arrive quietly. It comes with noise, sudden and sharp. A phone call at a time when the world should be sleeping. The voice of someone calm and careful, telling you that everything you depended on has disappeared, that my father was gone. And in that instant, my life split into before and after. I was 22, finishing finals, exhausted, responsible for my younger sister, Alara, who was 17 and days away from high school graduation. Our mother had long since left to live a new life, leaving us to navigate the world alone. And when our father died, there was no safety net, no family to catch us, just the two of us trying to hold what remained together. The days after his death moved quickly, but carried the weight of reality. Bills arriving before the obituary had even been printed. Loans and missed payments, like ghosts of a life we didn't get to finish. Our house was claimed, the car gone. My father's workshop and tools sold off, leaving us with nothing more than a small bag each of clothes, and the knowledge that our lives had been reduced to survival mode. And that night, I sat on the floor beside Alara as she cried silently, knees tucked under her hoodie, and realized that no one else was coming to save us, that I had become her parent, her guardian, her anchor in a storm she hadn't chosen. I made a decision then that would define the next decade. I would finish school. I would work any job necessary. I would build a life strong enough to hold us both, and I would not fail her. I worked mornings in the campus cafe, evenings delivering packages, nights studying whenever my eyes could stay open, sleeping in 4-hour stretches, living entirely in motion, every dollar stretched across 2 lives, every task chosen for survival and stability, losing relationships that couldn't survive in a life so constrained, friendships fading quietly, and yet learning that character is not polished in comfort, but forged in exhaustion, scarcity, and responsibility. Because when you are the only adult in a child's life, you learn quickly that courage is not a feeling, it's a choice. That love is measured in acts rather than words. That sacrifice is often silent and unacknowledged. Graduation came and went without celebration. I didn't throw a party. I didn't buy a cap and gown photo. I simply accepted a job at a mid-sized firm handling back-end operations. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even inspiring, but it paid, and that was enough. And we moved into a small apartment. 1 bedroom for Alara, 1 couch for me. Our lives compacted into walls that barely contained us. Yet, I never stopped learning, enrolling in online courses, devouring knowledge about marketing, automation systems, software development, anything that could prepare me for the future I didn't yet see. And then opportunity arrived through an old classmate, Mateo Cruz, who was building a platform to streamline operations for mid-sized businesses and needed someone who could navigate both the technical and business sides. I hesitated because it was unstable, but it also felt alive, and I had learned that survival alone is not enough, that growth requires risk. So I said yes, and my life split into 2 streams, 8 to 5 at a stable corporate job, nights and weekends in coffee shops and borrowed offices, coding, pitching, building, barely sleeping. But slowly momentum appeared. 1 client, then 2, then a review on a tech blog, and suddenly our small operation gained recognition. Yet I remained the quiet force behind the scenes, while Mateo became the public face, smiling for cameras, giving talks, handling investors, while I managed infrastructure, operations, and the delicate work no one noticed, but that made everything possible. And in that invisibility, I found peace, because I had learned that being underestimated is a tool, that patience is leverage, and that security for Alara was more valuable than applause. Years later, when Alara told me she was engaged, I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary until she named her fiancé, Daniel Hale, and in an instant the pieces clicked. His father was Gregory Hale, one of our largest clients, the man who had spent months trying to acquire our platform, the man who had ignored me at every meeting. And yet here I was, meeting the son who treated my sister with genuine respect, patience, and kindness. And for the first time, I felt a measure of trust in someone connected to that family. Because Daniel was not his father. He was his own man, and that mattered more than any business transaction. Meeting Gregory again was a test I hadn't sought. A brief sizing up, the old investor instinct sniffing out pedigree. And when he asked what I did, I gave a simple answer. I work in corporate, which was true in a technical sense and deliberately unremarkable. And for him, I disappeared, invisible, underestimated, the same way he had hoped to see me, which was fine, because I had learned long ago that respect isn't granted by appearances, but earned quietly. The wedding itself was a blur of formalities, white tablecloths, polished silver, laughter that moved in waves, and I stayed to the side, observing, until someone tapped my shoulder and said, "You're next. 2 minutes." And though I hadn't expected to speak, something in me refused to decline, because this was my sister's day, and every story I had lived, and every hardship I had endured, had led me to this room. I walked to the microphone and began simply, calmly, "Good evening. My name is Adrian Vale. I'm Alara's brother." And that was enough to draw the room's attention. I spoke of the years after our father died, of responsibility, sacrifice, and perseverance, of working through exhaustion and loss to ensure my sister had a future. I spoke of small victories, of nights with cold pasta and endless spreadsheets, of the startup Matteo and I had built from nothing, and how slowly, steadily it had grown, and the room shifted, forks paused, heads turned, recognition forming quietly, and then I stepped away from the mic, letting the truth hang, letting the unspoken weight of achievement and perseverance speak for itself. And Gregory Hale approached me moments later, the same man whose presence had once seemed impenetrable, now visibly recalibrating, a small, controlled smile on his face, saying, "You should have told me earlier." And I looked at him evenly, responding, "I didn't need to." And that was the end. No argument, no concession, nothing to prove, because I already had, silently, over years of work, of nights and weekends, of sacrifices made in the background, and because I had built something that required no approval, no validation, only diligence, patience, and care. We never sold the company to Gregory, not out of spite, not out of anger, but because his interest was transactional, not rooted in respect. And by that point, we didn't need validation from anyone who only understood worth after our resume was read. We scaled independently, deliberately, purposefully, and maintained professional relationships where needed, but on our own terms. And Daniel remained the partner my sister deserved, respectful, kind, steady, separate from the shadow of his father. And over time, I watched Alara thrive, teaching, volunteering, gardening, building her own life without fear, her joy unbounded. And I understood fully that every choice I had made, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every quiet victory had been worth it, because the life she led now, her peace, was the return on my investment. Her happiness, a measure of every risk I had taken, every burden I had carried. And me, I remained in the background, quietly, observing, living intentionally, unbothered by appearances or applause, because I had learned that true respect is never granted by those who only see the surface, that recognition after the fact is irrelevant, and that the only thing that matters is who you protected, who you provided for, who you stood for while no one was watching. And in that understanding, I found something far greater than fame or fortune. I found quiet confidence, the knowledge that I had risen by standing firm, not by forcing people to see me, that the people who once dismissed me now had no power over me, and that the world's applause was unnecessary, because the only judgment that counted had already been passed, and it was unequivocal. And so I watched my sister dance Daniel smiling beside her, my life quietly complete in the background, proof that the most important victories are the ones earned silently, carefully, and with unwavering commitment.